recommendation. And today I'm super stoked to have Craig Gleason, that is talking a little bit with me about, first of all, his film Plastic Ocean, as well as other stuff that he's onto. And I think maybe Craig, just we can start off with you introducing yourself a little bit, who you are, what you've been up to, and what are your motivations of doing what you're doing.
Well, it's great to see you and outside and on that beautiful island that you're on. And we are worlds apart at the moment. You're clearly out in the field in Costa Rica working with turtles, and I've got my head down in a post-production suite working on a new film at the moment. But I am taking a weekend off. I'm in Tuscany at the moment, just rewriting some of the script. But the film that relates specifically to Plastic Free July, of course, is A Plastic Ocean, which has been an incredible film to work on. And for those who haven't seen it, it's a film which says pretty much what's on the tin. It was one of the first films to look at the issue of single-use plastics, and particularly single-use plastics in the marine environment, which is where the film started, but it became such a big issue that we knew so little about that it migrated from being a marine story into being a planet story and ultimately a human health story. And that wasn't something that we really anticipated to the degree that that occurred. And in fact, the film was an 8-year project, but it took 4 years to in production. And we visited 21 locations around the world, investigating how bad single-use plastics were as a product in the marine environment, in our world's oceans, and what effect that was having on marine life. But of course, as we traveled to places, we got some answers, but not all the answers. In fact, we just got more questions. So we ended up taking the film further and traveling into pristine ocean locations that we believe were pristine, like the Indian Ocean near Sri Lanka, subantarctic waters off Tasmania, near Antarctica, and areas where we thought that we wouldn't find plastic, but yet we did. And once we started looking at the issue of single-use plastics, we of course found out that it was getting in the food chain. And once we realized the degree that these plastics and the toxins that they attract, that actually attach to the plastic and then release into fish and marine organisms, and how that travels up the food chain and ultimately we're at the top of the food chain. So we started to look at the human health aspect and endocrine disruption and what that means for us when these toxic chemicals become embedded in our tissue, in the fatty tissue and of our bodies, and how these chemicals mimic and sometimes block the natural chemicals that our body produces to engage us in things like reproduction, cognitive ability, just general development, particularly in young children. So what we found was that these chemicals do interrupt with that process, that natural process, and scientists were pointing to diseases such as cancer and diabetes and reproductive issues and cognitive disabilities in young kids. And that's when we realized that this product that we designed decades ago has become very toxic and is a terrible product, not only for us, but for other species on the planet.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think we've been using so many times in outreach initiatives, even here in Costa Rica, and it has always left a huge impression, I can tell, on everybody that has seen it. So I think it was definitely key to explain a lot of stuff, but also to cause, a change in awareness and also then hopefully a change in the end. So since your film has been released, what would you say has changed in around the issue of plastic? Is there anything that you can see that has been different?
Yeah, and this is important because when the film came out 3 years ago, there was very little awareness generally about the issue. I mean, when I started and I was invited onto this project by the producer, I knew very little about single-use plastics being a problem. In fact, I'd never heard the term single-use plastic. I didn't even know what that was. And so I realized that if I didn't know what that was. As a surfer, as a diver, as someone who spends a lot of time in the ocean making documentaries about the marine environment, how could I expect somebody in Idaho in America or Singapore or Mexico or someplace far from the ocean to actually understand what this issue is about? And so that made me realize that we had to explain it from the very start. And so that created a great deal of awareness. And since the film was released, I'm very, very pleased to say that we've seen more than 147, more than 150 countries now enact some sort of legislation, some sort of ban, levies against single-use plastic products. So we're now seeing countries all over the world not only recognize the problem, but move against single-use plastic products because of the problem that they're causing the environment. They're choking land environments as well as marine environments, and of course the toxicity and the issue that that's causing human health. And what's interesting, and particularly as I've spoken to governments and corporations and institutions all around the world since the film was released on Netflix and iTunes and in cinemas, is as soon as you start talking about human health, that's when you get people to start to listen, particularly governments, because human health is such an expensive big budget item for any government to deal with. And when they start to realize that this could be costing or is costing them a great deal of money, and it can be mitigated purely by banning the substance or introducing alternatives to it, that saves them a great deal of money in terms of their fiscal responsibility, then you start to get the ear of finance ministers and people like that. So we have seen certainly a big reaction to it. I've been working with the Plastic Oceans Foundation in Mexico, and I've spoken on several Senate panels there, and they've seen the issue recognised by not only the government but the Mexico City, and in fact legislation has been written to look at dealing with the problem there. So that's a big win. I spoke with the environment minister from Chile about a year and a half ago when I was in Chile, and he said to me, my wife and I watched the film, and he said we were both moved to the point where we cried at the vision and the story that we were seeing. He said, and I woke up the next morning, my wife was digging me in the ribs with her elbow, and she said, "You're the environment minister, go and write new laws, make sure that this stuff is banned." And so he did. He went and started out by writing legislation that banned single-use plastic bags from coastal areas. And as a new government came in, they took up that issue and they banned single-use plastic bags nationally. So we've certainly had a good response to the film, but also to the issue. And I think that particularly the awareness amongst the young people now, we're seeing this issue dealt with as it should be. But ultimately, the solution, I think, and maybe this is something that you have ideas on as well, is to ban single-use plastic products. I mean, you've seen this firsthand. You're famous for pulling that straw out of the nose of that turtle, which resonated all across the globe because people felt not only the pain of the turtle, but also empathized with you and the frustration that you felt as a scientist having to perform that operation on an animal with a product that ultimately either you or me or someone that we know could have been responsible for before we became enlightened to this problem.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, single-use plastics, I definitely knew what single-use plastic was before the film. Just because it has been a sad byline of my work ever since I started 13 years ago. So the first time I've ever stepped foot or like set foot on a beach in Costa Rica, you can see what the ocean washes ashore and how much of those items we are using in our everyday life. So it's really a people problem, if you want so. And I'm a firm believer that, you know, sometimes issues you need to tackle from different angles. So you can't just like, you know, wait for the government, for example, to pass a law. So I think a lot of those initiatives need to come from the people as well, you know, that actually demand a change as well because they are worried as well. And actually that leads to, I would love to plug one question already right here because that fits perfectly into this context. context is that who do you think you're making your films for? So you talked a lot about governments and government officials that, were moved by your film, using your film more on the grassroots level, right? So we are getting hundreds of volunteers into our project. And actually, one of the project leaders asked that question because she had issues of sometimes using your film for non-native speakers, right? So I work and works also in a country that is mainly Spanish speaking. So a lot of those issues, or the people that need to know about those issues, are not living in the Western world, and they don't necessarily speak English. So are there any efforts on your part of how to make your storytelling a little bit more available to those demographics?
Yeah, well, A Plastic Ocean has been translated into more than 25 languages now, Spanish included. And in fact, on Netflix in the country, it's global on Netflix. So if you watch it on Netflix, you can watch it in the language from the country that has Netflix. Of course, we understand that not all countries have Netflix or iTunes, but people can access the film if they go to a Plastic Ocean Foundation. And a Plastic Ocean Foundation can make the film accessible to everybody in communities and groups, scientific groups, local communities, villages, whomever, in a language that is appropriate to the country or region that they come from. So you're absolutely correct. It is important that we reach people and we reach people as far and as wide as we possibly can, which is why when we filmed A Plastic Ocean, we went to as many countries as we could possibly go to show that this is not just a problem in Indonesia or the Philippines, for example, two countries that have a massive problem and are in fact on the top list of the top 5 countries on the planet that have the worst output into the oceans of plastic. This is a problem, a global problem. And in fact, many of the plastics that developing countries around the rest of the world have comes because of first world problems like Australia, where I come from, and the United States and Germany and Europe exporting products that are packed in single-use plastic packaging. So they're not creating the problem. They're just adhering to world trade agreements and engaging in trade, but they're not being given the tools or the infrastructure to deal with this product once it reaches their shores. So they can't deal with it, and they don't have the ability to recycle it or process it. So it is a global problem, and it is a problem that each and every one of us are responsible for, and we can have a say in how that's dealt with. And it starts by simply refusing to accept products that come in single-use plastic. And that means by demanding from the people you buy your fruit and vegetables from to just sell them to you in their natural packaging. I mean, a coconut doesn't need to be wrapped in plastic. It's wrapped in the most natural, sturdy, strong, resilient packaging that Mother Nature could possibly give us. Bananas don't need plastic. They have their own wrapping. You just take that off and you've got the fresh, healthy, hygienic product inside that banana. Why does it need to come to you in plastic like supermarkets tend to force on us? And of course, we don't need that. So we need to become smarter consumers, but we also need to pressure our governments to legislate and to force the manufacturers that make these products to be responsible for their product from cradle to cradle. If you produce single-use plastic products, which you shouldn't be allowed to do anymore, but if you do, you should be responsible for its life cycle. Don't blame consumers for this. And this has been the big con that's been exercised since the 60s, is that manufacturers go, well, it's up to the consumer. They should be recycling properly. Well, a consumer can't recycle properly if we don't have the infrastructure that can deal with it. And of course, most places on the planet don't. And manufacturers want to blame consumers because it takes the onus off them. It means they're not responsible and they can keep producing this lightweight and profitable product, which we now know that they shouldn't be doing. So we need the responsibility to shift from the consumer onto manufacturers, I ultimately think. And that's a story that I think everybody needs to hear. We seem to have lost you there, Christina. I don't know whether I've frozen or whether you have frozen there. I know you're on an island in Costa Rica which has very limited Wi-Fi. In fact, you were telling me just recently that there's only a number of spots where you can get Wi-Fi, and you're sitting under a tree which is very near one of those spots, and I think we've lost you altogether there. So hopefully we'll get you to come back and talk to us about the work that you're doing. So Christina's involved with Footprint Foundation, who is supporting a lot of her work with turtles, and that's the work that she's doing with turtles is something that the Plastic Oceans Foundation is involved with and has recently become involved with. I know Plastic Oceans Mexico has been instrumental in rehabilitating beaches and helping organizations ensure the safety of turtles that are coming ashore and looking after their nesting and ensuring that these beaches are clean of single-use plastics so that turtles aren't getting snared in these plastic products as they are coming ashore to nest. And of course, turtles are like many marine animals. They can't tell the difference between plastic and their food. If you stick your head underwater with a mask on and you look at a plastic bag, it looks like jellyfish. And jellyfish are, in fact, a staple diet of turtles. So they can't tell the difference often between jellyfish, their food, and a plastic bag. And turtles have this very incredible digestive system. They have these spikes in their neck so that when they swallow an object, it gets stuck and it can't work its way back out. So it's forced down its throat. So once a turtle swallows a plastic bag, it's very difficult for it, once it realizes it's not what it intended to eat, for it to regurgitate it. So it has to ingest that plastic bag all the way through its system. And of course, once it reaches its digestive tract, that's where it starts to get into trouble. And we showed a scene in a plastic ocean where a turtle rescue center in Sardinia was taking care of turtles that were being found floating around the islands. And in fact, there was one that was filmed with Tanya Streeter, the freediver, who was looking into this particular issue. And they showed the kind of plastic particles that were being found in these turtles, and they had some that was from that particular turtle. But what happens is, as the digestive tract gets caught with this plastic, it blocks it and it causes gas within the turtle system. And what happens is that the turtle, it blows up, it creates gas, and it starts to float. And of course, turtles spend most of their time underwater, and the only way they can escape predators like shark is if they can swim properly. So when they're floating on the top of an ocean, they're fair game for their predators, and they're easy pickings. And so it creates a real problem for turtles when they ingest this stuff. Likewise, we found plastic, and we showed plastic in marine organisms as far down the food chain as plankton. And our scientists were able to film plankton ingesting microfibers. So we know that plastic is getting to the very base of the food chain. And when plankton eat microfibers, then plankton, of course, are food for other animals and small fish. And so small fish eat the plankton, bigger fish eat the smaller fish, larger fish eat that fish that's ingested and bioaccumulated all the plastic that it's eaten. And so that's how these chemicals move up the food chain. And what happens is, as plastic is in the ocean, it starts to absorb chemicals, other chemicals and pollutants that enter. Don't like to cling to water molecules, so they look for something else to cling to, and plastic is a great molecule for that to happen. So they cling to the plastic, and when fish eat that plastic and ingest the plastic, these other toxins release into the fatty tissues of the fish itself, and that's how their bioaccumulation occurs. And one of the hardest scenes for me, I think, as a filmmaker to film, was when we were opening the stomachs of seabirds, a particular seabird in one necropsy that we did called a shearwater. And we were finding dozens of these shearwater dead on the beaches of an island called Lord Howe Island off the east coast of Australia. And their stomachs were filled with plastic, and that's because their parents were feeding for fish in offshore islands and as I said, as far south as subantarctic waters. And these birds have incredible senses of smell, so they would see something bright on the surface of the ocean floating, and they would swoop down to look at it, and they would smell, because plastic, when it spends a lot of time in the water, accumulates algae, and sometimes fish lay eggs on it, and it develops very much a marine smell. And so it smells like food, and seabirds swoop down, ingest and swallow plastic whole, and then they go back to their rookeries and they feed their babies this plastic. And of course what happens is that these birds are unable to draw any energy from the plastic that they're ingesting, and that means that they die very full, very painful deaths, because they don't have the energy to take off and take part in the natural cycle of their life, and they end up dead. And in one of those birds, when the stomach that we opened actually had a bottle cap from a beverage bottle, one that I could have used 10 years ago before I knew that plastic beverage bottles were becoming a problem. And it made me realize at that point that I personally have probably been responsible for the death of an animal somewhere on the planet. And that was something that was very hard for me to deal with. But of course, she's back. We lost you there for a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me there, Christine? Are you back on air? Okay, we can see you, but we can't. It sounds like we're not quite getting through to you yet.
Electricity was gone, so in case you guys hear me again.
We can hear you, yes.
I cannot see you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back on. I knew it, but I can see you guys, so that's perfect.
Okay.
You know what? Katja, maybe just take over, since I'm not able to take over again, I guess.
Yeah, well, I've been talking about why turtles swallow plastic. We can hear you and we can see you if you can hear me. But I was mentioning the digestive tract of a turtle and how they have spikes in their necks, and once they start ingesting plastic, they can't regurgitate it and it goes through their system. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that if you can hear us.
Was that a yes?
Yeah, I don't think...
Okay. Trying to use the new link then.
Okay. So we'll just wait and see if Christina can rejoin our conversation. No, we've lost her again. As I mentioned, she's in Costa Rica, and there are only a few spots on the island that have internet. In fact, there's not even a proper mobile phone service there. So she's doing a very good job to be able to connect with us. She has found one location on the island under a tree.
I don't think I used the new link. I don't think.
Yeah.
Nope.
How's that? We can see you if you can.
Me? I can see you.
You can see us now?
The wonders of living in a developing country where the electricity just goes away, and it went so well.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about how you're in one of the few spots that have Wi-Fi there.
Well, Craig, since I can't see you, I'm just going to tell you that thank you so much for being here today. I think Katja probably has some more questions for you. I really appreciate all of this, especially living in, like I said, in a country where we don't have the infrastructure, as we talked about, to recycle and actually manage the plastic in any way that would be, helping the issue, other than we are doing beach cleanups. But we really need to spread more awareness and change habits of local people here. So with that, I'm hopping off just because I'm talking to myself here right now. And I'm probably going to look or watch the stream on Twitter right now with you too. Thank you, Craig. Okay,
well, thanks for joining us. We could hear you, and we got your message loud and clear. And it's a pity that we couldn't reach you. But maybe we've got some questions there, Katja.
We do have a few, and just going a little bit on what you were saying about turtles and not being able to regurgitate the plastic that they eat. I remember Christine talking to me about a couple turtles that were swallowing balloons, which I feel is not a plastic that is very talked about that frequently, that people are purchasing, and then obviously there's so many children who are walking around with their balloons and then they lose them, and then these end up in the oceans, and then they end up in the turtles. And I don't know, I find it very, very interesting that there's certain plastics that we talk so frequently about, but we completely neglect other plastics because they give us a different type of joy. And I remember personally as a child, I loved balloons, but just looking back at all the negative effects that those can also cause, it's quite upsetting.
Yeah, well, the balloons, and particularly the balloon ties, are something that we find a lot of when we do necropsies on seabirds. We found them almost in every single instance that we'd open a shearwater. Certainly a lot in the Laysan albatross. You find them because when you release a balloon, it goes up into the atmosphere. And then, of course, it is capable of traveling anywhere. So, I could release a balloon in Tasmania, the home island where I'm from, and it could find its way across the Indian Ocean to Sri Lanka or to somewhere where a marine animal is going to mistake it for food and ingest it. So that's something that I know many plastic organisations that are campaigning against single-use plastics are campaigning to educate people on. And I think most children these days understand that a balloon has a very big footprint and can endanger the lives of other animals. So certainly they're something that we don't recommend as a celebration anymore, because it may be a celebration for our lives, but it certainly isn't a celebration for the life of a turtle or a shearwater or a Laysan albatross.
Yeah, and Christine is she's able to look at her WhatsApp to communicate with me, telling me a little bit about how turtles expel plastic even from their nose before they completely swallow them. And that she believes that's probably how some turtles get straw stuck in their noses, and that turtles seem to be attracted to the smell of plastic and eat it thinking that it is food.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of the plastic bag looking like a jellyfish. It's just they literally smell it and think that it tastes good, that it is a part of their diet, which is very sad.
Yeah, we actually show a baby turtle in a plastic ocean starting to chomp onto a red piece of plastic, which looks like it's from a plastic bag. That certainly you wouldn't think would look like a jellyfish, but it's something that the animal was attracted to, as Christine says, by the smell. Fortunately, it wasn't able to take it all into its mouth, and we actually see it using its flipper to pull the plastic out of its mouth. And in that instant, that lucky turtle managed to get away without swallowing the plastic, because it probably would have killed it, as it does to thousands of turtles all around the world, as well as many other marine animals.
Definitely. It's such a shame. I know that personally, whenever I go to the oceans or near any like water, or even just on the streets, like picking up the plastic that is visible, because we can't see every single piece. There's so many microplastics and so much that has degraded that we should be able to like pick up what is there to prevent any animal or just from it to leaching into our soils and then into our water. But not everyone is that aware of the issue that plastic is posing on our environment.
Yeah, and it's look, and one of the critical issues now that we have this awareness is, of course, to look at solutions, and that's something that I find we're well down the path towards. But people always ask me, as an individual, what can I do? And that's a very important question, I think, because I mentioned earlier that we should make manufacturers responsible for their products, which we should. But we also should encourage, like, design is a very important aspect of this, and people forget how we designed our way into this problem. Plastic is ultimately a design flaw. We designed it for other purposes, and we decided to use it as a convenience for us. And so it has become a design flaw simply because it's killing animals and it is toxifying ourselves and our children. So therefore it is not working. So given that we designed our way into this, we can design our way out of it. And that simply means designing alternative products to the items that are single-use plastic products, or that we use single-use plastic packaging for. And that's something that the supporters of the Footprint Foundation, certainly Footprint US, are doing, and they're making a product now that's made out of fiber and recycled material and bagasse, and they're making all sorts of products that we use every day that we used to use as a plastic product, that such as coffee cups and even frozen dinners and things like that, which will break up, ultimately compost, and will not leave that massively long footprint on the planet. And that's important to understand, that we can engage in this design and we can move away from those products into new products. And as I've always said, and I campaign heavily for, ultimately we need to ban single-use plastic products, because it doesn't work as a product. When it gets into the environment, it chokes the environment like a disease. And when it comes back to us through the food chain, it causes massive health problems. So it should not be part of our lifestyle. It should not be part of our everyday existence. And that means banning the product and encouraging entrepreneurs to design new products and come up with new designs for things that we can use instead of hydrocarbon-based single-use plastic products. And we're seeing that certainly happen now. And as I mentioned earlier, as a consumer, you can also help that process by becoming a more conscious consumer and just being more clever about the products that you choose. And that can be something as simple as choosing fruit and vegetable that aren't wrapped in plastic, or buying your coffee that's in a aluminium tin, not in a plastic bag, because the aluminium can be recycled endlessly and reused again and again and again, whereas that plastic, if it is recycled, probably can only be recycled a matter of 6 times. But that's assuming, of course, that somebody keeps taking it back to be recycled, which very rarely happens, of course, because a lot of this plastic ends up in the environment.
Yeah, and as Christine would like to chime in and state that convenience will not go away. It is more difficult to change people's habits if the new habits are inconvenient. And a lot of the whole thing with plastic is that it is a huge convenience. It helps us with so many things that people prefer just to stick with it, because changing to an alternative is either going to be more expensive. But if you actually look into the numbers, which I have a little bit to try to educate myself more on the situation, that even if you pay a little bit more upfront for a reusable bag or for usable little bags for your produce, it does look more expensive at first, but you're continuously reusing that piece that you might spend a couple dollars or a couple euro depending on where you are. But at the end of the day, you're saving so much more money because you're not paying, at least in Europe and many of the countries, you have to pay a deposit for your single-use plastic bags. And people are fine with that in comparison to paying a couple more euro to get one that they can use day after day after day.
And that is an interesting point. The price, but what costs human health? What's the cost of having healthy children? What's the cost of making yourself as healthy as you possibly can be? So you're right. Particularly for my generation, this has become a habit, and it is very difficult to change habit, as Christina said, because of convenience, which is why it's very important to engage young people. And that's something that certainly many of us within the Plastic Oceans Foundation do, is we travel and we talk to kids in schools all over the world. And kids are I find, very much up on this topic. They know a lot about it, more than most adults. And that's the place to start, because children haven't formed these bad habits at this point. And so by providing proper education and the tools and the knowledge resources for kids to grab hold of and to have available to them, then they're not going to develop the habits that cause these sorts of problems. And in fact, they can start the process whereby new habits, better habits, healthier habits are formed. So children are very, very significant in terms of the solution to this problem. And in terms of helping their parents and people of my generation and the generation before mine of changing our habits by constantly reminding us that no, we don't need a straw with our drink. We have perfectly good lips and a perfectly good cup that we can use without that interface. No, we don't need to take a plastic bag from the supermarket because we've got plenty of bags at home we can take with us, as you mentioned, that we can use again and again. And that just, as you say, becomes a matter of remembering automatically to grab that plastic bag as you leave your home and go to the supermarket, that reusable bag. It could be Hessian, it could be made of plastic, it could be made of anything, but ultimately reusable, taking it with you just even without thinking about it, so that you get to the supermarket, you fill that bag full of your produce, you take it back home. Hopefully your vegetables and all your products don't have plastic on it, because if they do, you have to deal with it. And that's something else that's a lot of fun. And I would recommend, if anybody wants a fun day out, is to get a group of people and go to your local supermarket and do what I do. When you get to the checkout, empty everything out, and as it comes through the checkout, take all the plastic off it and then put it into a big mound, and then ask the cashier to get the manager, call the manager down and do it all together, and hand the plastic back to the manager and say to them, this is your plastic, not mine. I don't want to have to take this home, because as soon as I get home, all I've got to do, it's my responsibility then to take it off and then to dispose of it properly. I'm not paying for you to do that. I don't want it there in the first place. So you deal with it. You deal with it, dispose of it properly, and please don't wrap my products in plastic in future. And what happens when everybody does that? It holds up the checkout. And the checkout is where a supermarket makes its profit. The faster they can get people through the checkout, the more profit they can make. So when you slow that checkout down, you're impeding their ability to make profit. And that's when you'll get the notice of the owners and the shareholders of that supermarket. And once they start to notice that they're not being as profitable as they once were, they'll start to change the way that they do business. And an easy way for them to change, as many supermarkets now are actually doing, following public pressure, is that they're now providing aisles with what they call naked aisles, with fruit and vegetables that don't have plastic on them. So I urge people to play that game, because it's a lot of fun. It's not illegal, but it feels like you're being a little bit naughty. But when you go with a bunch of other people, you're spreading the message, and you're also helping contribute in a very positive way.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I've never heard that be done or seen that be done. But just thinking about the amount of plastic that I know when I come back from the store with my family and we start like taking everything out to put it into the fridge, it gets very, very large. And then just thinking about how certain stores even will like get bananas and wrap those in plastic. As you already said earlier, they come in a natural packaging. It's completely unnecessary, but people will also choose to take those fruits and vegetables that are already covered in something that you won't end up eating, that is completely natural packaging your food for you, and put it into more packaging that when they come home, some people will try to reuse those bags. But at the end of the day, that's not effective. It's not enough. The fact that we're still using them, even if we're finding alternative ways to use them, is still causing an issue.
That's right. And that's why some countries now have encouraged, and in fact, responsible supermarkets are now charging a levy on bags. And I'm based in Hong Kong, and my supermarkets there started doing that some time ago, and they started charging 10 cents on a bag. And what that does is that just reminds people that they should bring their own bag, particularly if people are conscious of what they're spending. And that is a very good way of getting people out of the habit. Charge them for the habit, and pretty soon they'll find another habit that's just as convenient but not nearly as costly. So there are ways and means of encouraging people to do this, which is why there is no one solution to this problem. This is why we need everybody to be engaged. We need the supermarkets to be engaged. We need our governments to be engaged through legislation, as we've mentioned. We need corporations to be engaged. And one of the messages that I give to many corporations around the world that I talk to about this issue is the consumers, that the kids of today are going to be the consumers of tomorrow. and they do not want to buy products that they know will despoil the environment or cause the death of another animal, or possibly create a health problem for their kids. So they're going to be looking for, and many are already, products that have a good backstory about how sustainable they are, how they're following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that they're sourcing their products in a fair trade way, for example, that their products do fit into a circular economy and can be composted into the environment and become part of the natural ecosystem. And that's a story that you can market. If you can build that into your marketing story, then it will offset the cost of the product alternatives that you may be producing, or the alternative packaging that's non-plastic that you may decide to buy or engage in for your product. It may cost you a little bit more at the front end, but you're going to make that back, because consumers are going to spend their dollars with you now and in the future, because you're telling them that you are actively engaged in protecting the environment, protecting your kids, and protecting other species. And that is ultimately, I think, something that we're going to find corporations starting to grasp hold of as a concept more and more as the pressure comes on. Because as new entrepreneurs come on with this knowledge, young entrepreneurs, they're automatically going to build this into their products. And so if a millennial is standing at a supermarket shelf and sees two products, the same product, but one in footprint fiber, cardboard, recycled cardboard or fiber packaging, and one in hydrocarbon-based plastic packaging. One will compost in a matter of months. The other one will be around for 500 years, and they're buying coffee. They're going to buy the product that they know has least amount of a footprint on the planet and makes them tread more lightly. And that's something that I think many corporations are starting to cotton onto, because they're going to face that competition. And ultimately, it is a free market in most places around the world, and competition drives the marketplace.
So that's going into one of the questions that was given to us. They basically, this person wanted to know that where does the food industry actually fall in the ranking of plastic waste contribution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have a percentage that I can give you on that. That has been studied. It's increasingly so. It is becoming, or has become, more and more responsible, primarily because we're now moving food products all around the world. And listen, this is one of the benefits of plastic. And, I tell people, I'm not anti-plastic. Plastic has been an amazing product because it has allowed all sorts of innovation in the medical field, for example, that saves lives. It has allowed us to transport food all over the planet and keep it fresh, so that we can eat avocados. I can eat avocados here in Tuscany from Mexico. And so the food industry has embraced it as a product. But of course, what's happened is that they're not only exporting the food item, they're exporting the problem of the single-use plastic product. And whilst I can deal with the food product simply by eating it, I'm not able, as a consumer that isn't aware of this problem and doesn't know how to dispose of it, to deal with the plastic, because I merely put it in the rubbish bin. I think it goes away from me. And of course, it doesn't go away from me. It may go to landfill. It may end up in the ocean. It may end up in the stomach of a fish. And that fish may come back on my plate as food, and I may be ingesting the very product that I'd thrown away a decade earlier. So food industry does have a big responsibility, and certainly not only just for the single-use plastic issue, but for the climate crisis. I would urge people to become locavores and start to buy food products from their local farmers and their local marketplace, because your footprint is so much more less. You can buy it without the plastic packaging on it, which means no one has to pull virgin resources out of the ground to cover that item in. And you're getting it fresh, and it's not being packed and jetted across the world or shipped across the world and creating a large carbon footprint. So support your local industry, support your local farmers, buy your food locally.
Yeah, and I think that's great. It's also then you know where your food's coming from. There's so many benefits from shopping locally that we also then are, as we're limiting plastic, we're creating a whole new movement. And the one thing that I've noticed is that while there are a lot of stores that do have locally sourced food and everything, there are not many places that they're not strongly advertising it. They'll be more likely to advertise the avocados that come from Mexico or the mangoes that are coming from Thailand, and they're pushing those products for me because obviously they do have to pay a little bit more for that food to get there. And then because you're seeing advertisements of that, so many people, like there have been studies covered that if you see the advertisement in the store, that's what you're more likely to buy.
That's correct. And also, but what we're seeing now also is, because of this, is a rise in more community-based gardening. We're seeing in New York, of all places, rooftop gardening has become a big thing. People are even have beehives and are encouraging honey production on the rooftops. And certainly we're seeing that in Hong Kong as well. There's a lot of encouragement for permaculture in Hong Kong, and I've got good friends who actually actively engage in weekend permaculture courses. And you can go along as a member of the public and learn how to grow your own vegetable on your tiny balcony in your tiny apartment in Hong Kong. And in fact, that's something that I learned with the help of some friends in Hong Kong, to the point where I was composting all my organic waste. And it's amazing how that reduces the waste that you have on a weekly basis to get rid of from your bin. So it's between 20 and 30% in most instances. If you can compost your own organic waste, then you're saving a lot of product going to the landfill, and you're turning it into soil, which you can grow flowers in or grow vegetables in. So I was not only composting on my tiny apartment in Hong Kong, but I was growing vegetables from it. And you know, we've got pumpkins, and we've got pineapples, and we've got mango trees, we've got avocado trees, we've got chilies, we've got sweet potatoes, we've got herbs, all growing from pots and what I call square foot gardening in Hong Kong. And it's actually, it makes you feel good. I smile when I'm up there watering these plants. It makes me smile. I enjoy it. And I actually did this in Glasgow. I've just spent 5 months in Glasgow, because that's where we're doing the film production for my new film, The Last Glaciers, which is on the climate crisis. And so I've had to rent an Airbnb in Glasgow for the duration of the time that I've been there. And of course, I had this problem of organic waste and glass and products because the recycling had stopped. So I asked the owner of the apartment if they would mind if I started composting the food waste and turning it into a garden for them. And they were very happy for that to happen. So when I left Glasgow a week or so ago, the owner of that apartment now has carrots, chilies, capsicum, violas, sweet potato, radish, and a bunch of herbs, basil, all sorts of herbs. They have a wonderful garden there. And that just made me feel good to do that, to grow that, to stop putting that product as waste into landfill and actually using it so it's not waste and creating something that someone else could use and enjoy. Brought a lot of joy to me and just made me feel better as a person and contributing something.
There's definitely a huge movement towards getting starting the beehives, starting the home gardening. Even at my university, we have in the behind them we have beehives, because we can collect our own honey and we can protect the bees and find a way to actually increase the population, since they are, unfortunately, they are going slowly extinct, and without them we lose everything. But
everything collapses. Bees are, to us, people should see them like water. We can't live without water. We can't live without bees and insects, without that pollination. But you're right, we're losing them because of pesticides. and many areas we're seeing 70% bee collapses in places in the European Union and America. I was in Tasmania over Christmas and visited a well-known producer of honey there, and he said I think it was 60% of his business now is exporting bees, not the honey. He's farming bees and exporting the bees to the United States because they're having collapses of their hives, particularly in places like California, where they need them for the almond farms and the fruit farms that they've got there. So beehives are incredible. Wherever you can support them by growing flowers on your balcony or producing a garden is incredibly important to these little workers.
Definitely. And as it is Plastic Free July and we're talking about what we can do, what have you done? What have you given up for? What are you trying to refuse in your life to support the Plastic Free Month?
Yeah, well, I've pretty much given up just about everything to do with plastic as a result of making the film. And, you know, it's, as I say at the end of the film, with knowing comes caring, with caring comes change. Once you know, you can care, and then you can become involved in the change. But it is a habit, and quite often I will forget at a restaurant to ask my server to bring me a drink without the plastic straw. So it is important to keep remembering and to keep reinforcing the plastic-free nature of your own existence. And you know, this shouldn't be something that we do in July, of course. It should extend beyond July. But July has made me think, because we are celebrating the need to live plastic-free existence, it has caused me to think a lot more about where I have problems, the most problems. And that, for me as a documentary filmmaker and traveling around the world, one of the biggest problems I have, of course, is where the environment that I'm in is out of my control. So being on an aircraft, for example, and how do I get around not being served that tray that's filled with plastic? The food comes cooked in a plastic bowl, the water's in a plastic throwaway plastic jar, the yogurt's in a plastic tub. And the difficult thing, of course, with this, particularly with airlines, is once it goes on that plane, whether you eat it or not, it gets thrown away. So I've been working with airlines to try and change that. I've been working with Cathay Pacific, who recognise the problem and are doing their best to mitigate that. And they've been trialling all sorts of different products, from plant-based plastics through to just swapping out the plastic items for alternatives. And of course, the further, the sad reality is, the further up front you sit in a plane, the less of a problem it becomes, because in business class you're given metal cutlery and you are served in proper bowls, so you don't get that problem. And so it's trying to encourage airlines to continue that sort of service all the way through the aircraft, so that people are given a choice. And certainly with airlines that I fly with, where I haven't been working with them, I always send a note in, and this goes for hotels as well. Before I arrive at a hotel, I send a note to the hotel, and when I arrive, I ask to see the manager, and I ask them to clear my room of any single-use plastic products. I don't want plastic water bottles in there. I don't want plastic toothbrushes, and I don't want my laundry to come back with a plastic covering on it, because I don't need it. And I know that as soon as I take that off, it gets thrown away and it'll end up in the environment. So return my laundry on a hanger, or neatly folded in a basket, or just on the chair or on the bed. That's fine. It doesn't need plastic around it. And I'll bring my own bamboo toothbrush. And if you do have filtered water, which most hotels do, just serve it in a steel jug. It looks better anyway. I mean, there's nothing looks worse, for me, walking into a room and seeing two very cheap and nasty plastic bottles of water sitting on the bedside table. Put a lovely steel jug of water there that you can refill at any time. And it not only looks better, but I think it's should be part of your marketing plan. And what most people don't realise is that most hotels have in-house filtration systems. So the water that's coming out of the tap in the bathroom is actually better quality than the water you would be getting from that plastic bottle, because as that plastic bottle has traveled to you, it's probably come from overseas. It's probably just come from a tap, from a municipal service somewhere in America or Europe. It's been put in a plastic bottle. It's been stuck in a warehouse where the temperature has changed. The plastic chemicals in the bottle have started to leach into the water. It's then been put on a ship, and it's been shipped for, weeks across an ocean, where it's then been moved into another warehouse. It's then been moved from a warehouse into a truck. It's then been taken from a truck to the supermarket, where you've bought it a month or so later, 6 months later, and that water's degraded immeasurably. So you don't really want to be drinking water out of plastic bottles. It's not good for you. And laboratory tests have proven that, and we showed that in a plastic ocean. So you're much better taking that glass cup or your reusable container and filling it with water out of that hotel bathroom faucet than you are from drinking from that plastic water bottle.
Definitely. I think that's definitely something that I will definitely consider when I go to a hotel or if I'm traveling, just to tell everyone, please, remove it. Because once you do step into that room, even if you don't open those mini plastic shampoo bottles or the water, they're not going to reuse it to give to somebody else, because it could have been tampered with. It could have been used.
And those little plastic bottles, there's two things about that. And once again, it's not just it's little bottles. It's the fact that you're using liquid detergent anyway. And this is another area where you can save money and also save from discarding and being responsible for plastic becoming in the digestive tract of a whale or a turtle, is by stop buying hand wash soap that's liquid. Stop buying liquid detergent. Stop buying liquid conditioner and shampoo. 95 to 98% of that product that you're buying is water. You're paying for water. It's ludicrous. There's only a tiny little bit of the actual product that you want in that product. And when you squeeze it out and goes into your hand, it's all liquid. Most of that's water. And it lasts, for a couple of weeks. If you like shampoo, you like conditioner, and you like value for money, buy a solid bar, a shampoo bar. Looks like hand soap, like solid hand soap. Buy solid conditioner bar. Buy a solid bar of soap, and it will last you for months. And that's because there's very little water in it, and you're actually getting what you pay for. And generally speaking, it comes wrapped in paper, which can be recycled or can compost. So that's another very simple tip. If you want to take it further, you can do what I do, and that is make your own. It's very simple to make conditioner. It takes about 8 minutes with the right products to make your own conditioner, and you can make it, it's healthy, natural. You can buy organic products, and you can make big jars of it that last you for a year. You can do the same with dishwashing soap, with household detergents. Very simple to make these out of lemons. Distill lemons in a pot, add vinegar and a few other ingredients, and all of these recipes are online, and they're really good fun to make with kids. So if you've got kids, they're great projects on the weekend, and particularly if you're in lockdown for COVID, because it means you don't have to get it delivered to your door, and then you don't have all of this rubbish piling up around your ears. You can make this stuff. You can keep the glass jars from the products that you buy in glass, because you don't buy plastic products wrapped in plastic, and you just refill those with the conditioner and the washing up detergent or the household products that you want to use, and it's fun. So there's many ways around using these products, and particularly those tiny little plastic packaging things that we're given in hotels. That drives me nuts. It's such a waste every single day. Imagine how many of those are thrown out, used once and discarded.
It's very unfortunate, and then especially to go, if you're going on a holiday, you go to your hotel room and you have all these little bits of pieces of plastic, and then you go to the beach and you see the same plastic just sitting there. It's very unfortunate, and we do need to make a change. And I'm very happy that there are movements that are working on it, but we all need actively together, and hopefully that will happen soon. And one day we will live in a world that is definitely less reliant. Like as you said, it is very helpful in the medical industry, but in the food industry, it's not necessary.
Exactly. It's not a matter of being hopeful for the future. We have no choice. We have to do it because this stuff is causing our life support systems to collapse. And once those life support systems collapse, there's nowhere for us to go. We don't have another planet. We only have a certain amount of fresh water that's frozen in the glaciers and the ice sheets around the world. And once that's contaminated, then it becomes very difficult to source fresh water. And of course, we don't go very long without fresh water. And so we have to change. And I think that recognition has come about. We just need to force people who play in the corporate space and who profit from us as consumers. We need to force them to act differently and more responsibly so that we all benefit from a cleaner environment. And I am optimistic because we have no alternative, and being humans, I give us a little bit of credibility for being smart enough to realise that and to not be the architects of our own demise.
Definitely. I think just seeing the way that people are really starting to fight for the environment and starting to change the way that they practice their daily lives. I think, as you said, we really do not have a choice, and people are recognizing that, and it will come. The day will come where it's hopefully completely eradicated from our daily lives.
So let me ask you, Katia, what your Plastic-Free July promise has been, and have you upheld it?
Yes, I don't use, well, I try my best to not use any single-use plastic the entire year, but definitely I've been more cautious of avoiding everything. So if I go to the grocery store, trying not to get like my ham or my cheese in like the single like slice packages that have every layer topped with plastic to separate them. I've definitely moved away from single-use water bottles quite a while ago, but sometimes it's inevitable. I found myself in a situation where I was very dehydrated hiking in the mountains, and the only water that was nearby me was a nice man had a water bottle. It was unfortunately single-use plastic, and he offered it to me. But at that point, I was not able to make it down the mountain.
That's right. Well, you have to be practical. And this is one thing that I do tell kids is because I get asked quite often if I fish anymore. And the answer is I don't because I know what's in fish and I've seen it. And I know what the analysis tells us. And fish aren't healthy to eat anymore because they carry a lot of toxicity. But I am practical. And if we're working on an island or somewhere where there is nothing else to eat, then but fish, then we will eat fish, of course, regardless of the long-term health benefit that may cause. The short-term problem of not eating negates the concern about the fish. And likewise for your scenario, you know, you have to drink water, and that's an instance where that was the only opportunity for you to do so. You made the right decision, but of course, it just helps you make the decision, or remember to make the decision next time you go hiking to take more water in reusable bottles with you.
It's all a learning experience, and I think when people start to see the obstacles, they start to think that it's not possible, but in reality, it's just a matter of thinking smarter. Like in my situation, I could have thought further ahead and thought, oh, I would need this much water for this long of a hike, rather than setting myself up to then have to rely on that single-use plastic that will not be gone out of this planet until way after my lifetime ends. It's not worth the negative costs. But besides that, I think I've noticed that it's a lot easier for me to avoid plastic use depending on where I am in the world, which has definitely struck me to be a lot more cautious about what I'm selecting, what I'm doing, and where I'm going, because also in certain areas they automatically assume without asking you, and then you have plastic in your hands, not knowing what to do with it, trying to get rid of it, and they say, oh, we can't take it back.
Yeah, and of course, we've had a problem with COVID and the virus, where a lot of people and a lot of corporations are taking advantage, I think, of the pandemic to push more plastic on us, because they say that you can dispose of the plastic, and therefore the virus isn't collecting on products, from supermarkets. But that's since been proven scientifically to not be the fact. In any case, when I get home from the supermarket now, I wash all of the products that I bring home, and make sure that that they're safe to handle. But it certainly isn't, the pandemic isn't an excuse to be going back to the single-use plastic products that we once did and we once used. But I am seeing a lot of that happen now, and that's something I would urge everybody to resist, to be aware of, and to be confident in the fact that that they should be washing and sterilising products that they use on a regular basis anyway. There's no need to take a single-use plastic product just because you're frightened of the bacteria.
Definitely, and I think people are getting more wary of what's on the products. But the thing is, even if you do put it into another protective plastic bag, it's still already on that original product. So regardless, you have to wash it. And it's better for your own health and safety if you wash it. And just using more and more plastic bags is not going to necessarily protect you. What will protect you is wearing a mask and washing your hands. But even with the mask situation, that is slowly starting to pose as another environmental issue, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions from anybody that has maybe some of their own solutions and suggestions?
Let me check if anything has popped up. I don't think we do. Okay, well, this has been...
We've covered just about everything.
Yes.
We've stumped everybody. We've answered all their questions.
This has definitely been a very informative discussion, definitely for myself. I'm definitely interested to see what would happen if I went to the grocery store with my friends and unpackaged everything and gave it all the plastic back to the manager. I think that's definitely it's an amazing thing to do over just the weekend, just to go down to the grocery store and stump everybody.
There's a group in Hong Kong that have started doing it, and they call it Trash the Checkout. There's also a group in the UK that's doing it as well, and they videotape it. It's quite funny to watch. So I urge everybody to organise your own Trash the Checkout afternoon and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, Christine would like to apologize once again for her internet crashing. It's so very unfortunate, but her being on Costa Rica, protecting all the turtles and doing all of her marine conservation work, it's difficult, but it definitely has a greater payoff with all the work that she's doing.
Yeah, well, we support the work that she does, and we thank her and her organisation for the work that they're doing, and Footprint Foundation for supporting that work. It's important that we do recognise this work and why we need to do it and to support it. So we wish her all the best of luck, and we will, of course, be following her work on a daily, weekly and monthly basis as she continues to post amazing photos of herself and the turtles that she's working with.
Definitely. And I have to say thank you much for helping direct A Plastic Ocean and for working on your next film. I think definitely movements with the film industry is definitely an amazing addition to the entire movement in itself, definitely bringing more awareness and helping educate those who might not be aware, and definitely find that knowledge through watching films like yours.
Thank you very much. Well, appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and hopefully we can encourage other people to enjoy a plastic-free July.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.